Beneath the streets of our oldest cities lies a forgotten world of tunnels and chambers. These hidden labyrinths hold secrets that could rewrite our understanding of ancient life. This journey into the tunnel vision's mysteries buried beneath the foundations of early cities will reveal how these spaces were used for everything from sacred rituals to desperate survival. We will explore why a civilization would build an entire city deep underground, and what strange forces might have been harnessed in sound chambers carved from solid rock. By the end, you will see the history of human civilization from an entirely new perspective, one that looks not up at the monuments, but down into the earth. What part of the past do you think is still hidden just out of sight? The ground beneath our feet has always held a powerful dual meaning. It was a source of life-giving water and precious minerals, yes, but also a gateway to something otherworldly. For our earliest ancestors, the subterranean world was a realm of profound spiritual significance. Cultures across the globe, from the Greeks with their Hades to the Mesopotamians with their bleak underworld of Urkala, told stories of descent and transformation. These myths were not mere fantasies. They reflected a tangible reality, a belief that the earth itself was alive with forces and deities that demanded reverence. This sacred connection directly influenced where and how people built. They were not just constructing cities above ground, they were intentionally connecting their world to the one below. The very act of carving into the living rock was an act of communion, a way to tap into that raw, chthonic power. This explains why so many of the earliest tunnels and chambers are found in direct association with temples and places of worship. They were not basements or storage cellars. They were liminal spaces, thresholds between the world of the living and the domain of the gods and the dead. But the impulse to go underground was not solely spiritual. It was also deeply practical, born from a fundamental need for safety. When enemies appeared on the horizon or when the elements turned violent, the earth offered a ready-made fortress. The same dark passages used for secret rituals could, in a moment of crisis, become a refuge for an entire community. This duality of purpose, sacred sanctuary and secular stronghold, is the key to understanding these structures. They were built with a foresight that considered both the eternal and the immediate. The immense labor required to carve these spaces by hand with simple tools speaks volumes. It tells us that the perceived value of what lay hidden below was far greater than the comfort and security of the world above. So what specific forms did this desperate, devout labor take? The answers emerge from the dust of two very different ancient cities. Derinkuyu is a testament to what a community can achieve when its survival is on the line. Carved into the soft, malleable volcanic rock of central Turkey, this was not a simple cave system but a true city, descending perhaps 18 stories into the earth. Think about that for a moment. That is the equivalent of a modern skyscraper, but built entirely downward. This labyrinth contained everything needed for a society to endure a long siege. There were living quarters, chapels, stables for animals, storage for food, and even presses for making wine. All of this was connected by a network of corridors with massive, wheel-shaped stone doors that could be rolled into place to isolate each level. These doors were the city's final defense, a last, desperate barrier against any invader who managed to breach the complex. The air was kept fresh by an ingenious system of ventilation shafts that reached all the way to the surface, while deep wells provided a secure water source, tapped from far below where an enemy could easily poison it. The construction is believed to have started in the 7th or 8th century before the Common Era. a project of such immense scale that it would have required the coordinated labor of generations. Who organized this monumental task? How did they maintain order and morale for thousands of people living in perpetual twilight, their world reduced to the glow of oil lamps and the sound of their own echoing footsteps? The existence of Derinkuyu suggests a society with incredible foresight and a powerful, shared instinct for preservation. It forces us to expand our definition of a city, from a collection of buildings on a plain to a living organism that could retreat entirely into the earth, waiting for the danger above to pass. This was not just a hiding place, it was a complete, functional world operating in secret, a silent guardian for the vulnerable community living on the surface. Far from the desperate refuge of Derinkuyu, another kind of mystery was being carved into the bedrock of Egypt. The Pyramids of Giza stand as eternal symbols of pharaonic power, their peaks aimed at the heavens, but their true story may be written in the darkness below. A sprawling, cryptic network of tunnels, shafts, and chambers extends deep beneath the famous plateau, a hidden landscape that might predate the monuments we see today. These are not the grand, polished corridors leading to royal burial chambers. These are rough-hewn passages, some now submerged by rising groundwater, others terminating in sealed doors or leading to spaces that have not felt a human presence in thousands of years. Modern explorations using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies have mapped startling anomalies beneath the sand and stone. The scans reveal what appear to be vast, unexplored voids, hinting at an entire subterranean level to this ancient sacred site. So what was the purpose of this hidden world? The debate among Egyptologists is fierce. Some propose a purely practical function, suggesting these were access tunnels for the quarrying of the immense limestone blocks used in the pyramid's construction. Others see the hand of hydrological engineers, theorizing they were part of an intricate system to manage the Nile's annual flood or to tap into underground water tables, perhaps for ritual purification. But the most compelling theory connects them directly to the Egyptian spiritual cosmos. In their mythology, the sun god Ra traveled through a dangerous underworld each night before being reborn at dawn. Could these physical tunnels have been a symbolic representation of that journey, a place where the pharaoh's soul could navigate the perils of the afterlife? This spiritual interpretation gains weight from a stunning modern discovery. Researchers using cosmic ray imaging, a technique that maps density inside large structures, identified a massive void deep within the Great Pyramid itself. Dubbed the Big Void, this cavernous space is over 100 feet long and sits directly above the Grand Gallery. Its precise dimensions and purpose remain completely unknown. It has no visible entrance, no obvious function in the known architecture of the tomb. It simply exists, a secret held within the stones for 4,500 years. This single finding challenges the comfortable narrative that the pyramids were merely elaborate tombs. It suggests a design of breathtaking complexity, where every chamber and passage, both above and below ground, served a precise, often hidden role in a grand cosmological blueprint. The very foundations of this iconic city were not just a platform for greatness. They were an active, integral part of its spiritual machinery. What other voids and channels lie undetected, their secrets preserved by the very weight of the stone? But the manipulation of the Earth's power was not always for physical survival or grand pharaonic ambitions. On the Mediterranean island of Malta, a different kind of engineering was taking place, one that sought to command the very air itself. The Hal Saflieni Hypogeum is a 3-level underground complex carved from solid limestone, a place that served as both a sanctuary and a massive collective tomb. Its chambers, some painted with ochre spirals, deliberately mimicked the forms of the megalithic temples that stood above ground. Yet walking through its echoing halls, you quickly realize this was more than a simple mirror of the surface world. The architecture here is tuned almost like a musical instrument. One specific chamber, known as the Oracle Room, possesses an acoustic phenomenon so precise it defies easy explanation. When a deep male voice projects a sound at the correct frequency, the entire room resonates. The vibration is not just heard, it is felt in your bones, a low hum that seems to emanate from the stone itself. Modern acoustic studies have shown that this specific resonance can directly affect human brainwave patterns, nudging the mind toward trance-like states, reducing anxiety and altering perception. The question is unavoidable. Was this a happy accident of Neolithic construction, or was it a calculated design? The precision required to achieve this effect, carving a chamber to amplify one specific note without any of our modern instruments for measurement, points toward an intentional, sophisticated science of sound. Why would a culture that had not yet discovered metal tools pour such effort into creating an auditory experience in a house of the dead? The answer seems to lie in a world where the boundaries between life, death, and the spirit world were porous. The priests or shamans of this society may have used this sonic technology as a direct conduit. In the flickering torchlight, with the very stones singing around them, they could guide their community into collective states of heightened awareness, perhaps to communicate with ancestors or to receive visions. The Hypogeum suggests that the tunnel vision of these early builders was not a limitation but a focus. They looked beneath their city not just to inter the deceased, but to access other layers of reality, using the earth as a resonator to amplify human consciousness. This was not mere superstition. It was applied spiritual physics, a technology of transcendence buried in the dark. While the Maltese sought to channel sound, another civilization mastered the flow of water itself. In the heart of ancient Persia's blistering deserts, survival depended on a hidden miracle. Stretching for thousands of miles beneath the sun-baked earth, the Qanat system was a hydrological masterpiece that turned barren lands into fertile empires. These were not simple ditches. They were gently sloping tunnels, meticulously engineered to tap into underground water tables trapped in the foothills of distant mountains. Using nothing but gravity, this subterranean river was guided across vast distances, emerging exactly where it was needed to nourish cities and farmlands on the arid plains. This invisible network was the lifeblood that sustained the Achaemenid and Sasanian empires, allowing them to flourish in regions where surface water was a fleeting dream. The construction of a single Qanat was a monumental undertaking. Teams of specialized workers, known as muqanis, began by sinking a mother well deep into the water-bearing layer of the earth. From this starting point, they would begin the terrifying work of digging the main tunnel backward toward its destination. At regular intervals, they dug vertical access shafts down to the tunnel's level, providing air for the diggers, a way to remove excavated soil, and vital access for maintenance for centuries to come. Walking across the Persian landscape today, you see these shafts as rows of circular mounds, like a string of beads marking the hidden artery below. The knowledge required was immense. These ancient engineers had to understand geology and hydrology with an intuitive precision, calculating the perfect, gentle slope. Too steep, and the water would flow too fast, eroding the tunnel walls. Too shallow, and the water would stagnate and fail to reach its destination. They accomplished this with rudimentary tools, likely using nothing more than weighted strings and sighting rods. The social impact of this technology was as profound as its engineering. Water from the Qanats was allocated through intricate time-sharing agreements, often measured by the burning of a standardized candle. The protection of these channels was enshrined in law, for to damage a Qanat was to threaten the survival of the entire community. This vast hidden web demonstrates a fundamental truth. The most critical foundation of a city was not always its walls or its temples, but something entirely invisible, a silent, constant flow of life-giving water moving tirelessly beneath the feet of its inhabitants. How many other ancient solutions to modern problems, like sustainable water management, are still buried, waiting to be rediscovered? But belief can also be a dangerous thing, forcing communities into the shadows. While the Persians built to conquer the desert, the early citizens of Rome carved out a different kind of refuge, a sanctuary for the dead and the persecuted. Beneath the bustling streets of the empire's capital lies a silent mirror city stretching for an estimated 300 miles. This is the world of the Roman Catacombs, a labyrinth of tunnels carved from soft tufa rock that housed the remains of millions. These were not just burial galleries for early Christians, Jews, and pagans. They were a hidden spiritual home, decorated with some of the most ancient Christian art in existence. Faded paintings of the Good Shepherd, of Jonah and the whale, and simple symbols like the fish told the story of a fledgling faith, finding its voice and its identity in the darkness. In a time when practicing Christianity could mean death, these tunnels became clandestine meeting places for worship. The very air, cool and still, would have been thick with whispered prayers and hymns, a stark contrast to the pagan city roaring overhead. The labyrinthine design was brilliantly practical, maximizing space for countless burial niches, but it also served a strategic purpose. The twisting, identical corridors could confuse and disorient any Roman soldiers sent to raid an illegal gathering, giving the faithful precious moments to escape or conceal their sacred rituals. To walk these passages today is to feel the palpable weight of that history. You are not just moving through rock, but through a reservoir of collective memory, of faith maintained under the threat of violence, and of a hope so powerful it was nurtured in the realm of the dead. The foundations of Rome were built on legions and law, but the catacombs reveal another, more enduring foundation, one built from belief and preserved in the cool, dark earth. This drive to seek answers and safety below ground seems to be a universal human impulse, a thread connecting cultures across the globe. While the Roman catacombs sheltered a faith in its infancy, on the other side of the world, an entire civilization was building its cosmology directly into the earth. The immense ruins of Teotihuacan, the city of the gods, have always posed a profound mystery. Who were the people that built its colossal pyramids, and why did they vanish? The answers may not lie in the grand plazas, but deep below them. Beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, archaeologists discovered an entrance that had been deliberately sealed for nearly 2,000 years. It led to a tunnel, a man-made passage stretching for hundreds of feet into the darkness under the pyramid. This was no ordinary corridor. It was a meticulously constructed recreation of the underworld, a central concept in Mesoamerican belief. The journey through this tunnel was a symbolic descent, and at its end lay a discovery that defied all expectation. Several chambers were found filled with a breathtaking array of ritual objects, from delicate jade statues and ceremonial knives to mirrors made of polished pyrite that would have glittered like captured stars in the torchlight. But the most baffling find was a large pool of liquid mercury. In the ancient world, mercury was an incredibly rare and toxic substance, difficult to obtain and even more dangerous to handle. Its presence here, shimmering in the subterranean gloom, was both deliberate and deeply symbolic. Researchers believe this quicksilver river was meant to represent a sacred body of water in the underworld, perhaps a lake or a river that the souls of the dead had to cross. Its unstable, reflective surface, constantly shifting and catching the light, would have created a disorienting, otherworldly effect. perfect for a space dedicated to communing with powerful, unseen forces. The sheer effort involved in creating this hidden realm speaks to its immense spiritual importance. This was not a place for public ceremony. It was a secret, powerful heart of the city, a place where the ruling elite or the priesthood could perform rituals to legitimize their power, to communicate with ancestors, or to influence the very cycles of life and death. The entire city of Teotihuacan, with its monumental temples reaching for the sky, was fundamentally anchored by this dark, Mercury-laced underworld. Its spiritual foundations were not just symbolized, they were physically and dangerously buried. The shimmering Mercury River of Teotihuacan reveals a civilization plumbing the depths of spiritual power, but for another ancient culture, the life-giving force was far more tangible. On the stark, sun-scorched plains of Peru, the Nazca people faced an existential challenge. They are world-famous for the immense geoglyphs, the lines and figures of spiders and monkeys so vast they can only be seen from the sky. Yet their true genius for survival is written not on the surface of their desert, but directly beneath it. Here, they engineered the puquios, a sprawling system of subterranean aqueducts that turned one of the driest places on Earth into a livable homeland. These were not just simple wells, the design was breathtakingly clever. They carved deep, horizontal tunnels into the earth to intercept underground water tables, and at the surface, they constructed spiral-shaped openings that descended into the ground like a stone corkscrew. These spirals, called ojos or eyes, were far more than decorative. They functioned as a primitive but brilliantly effective form of hydraulic engineering. As the wind swept across the desert floor, it would funnel down these spiral openings, creating a pressure differential that literally pushed the water through the underground canals. It was a natural pump powered by the very air of the desert, ensuring a constant, reliable flow of water for drinking and for irrigating crops in an otherwise barren landscape. The mystery deepens when we consider the connection between this hidden world and the famous art above. Some researchers propose that the vast Nazca lines are not random. They may have formed a giant map, a sacred geography that charted the very flow of the underground water sources. The figures and lines could have been a spiritual blueprint, linking the celestial patterns in the sky with the life-giving veins of water deep in the earth. This creates a profound picture of a culture that saw its world as a single, integrated whole, where the heavens, the land, and the underworld were all connected. How did the Nazca, without a written language to pass down complex engineering principles, design, build, and maintain such a vital and sophisticated system for generations? The answer might lie in a form of knowledge so embedded in their culture and ritual that it needed no written words, a living science passed from one generation to the next through the very act of maintaining the water that gave them life. The puquios force us to reconsider what we value as a monument. The true wonder of the Nazca is not only the giant drawings meant for the gods, but the hidden, humming machinery that sustained the people who made them. The myth of the Minotaur, a monstrous hybrid trapped within an inescapable maze, has echoed through the ages, yet the story of the labyrinth might be more than just a thrilling legend. At the heart of the Minoan civilization on Crete lies the sprawling palace of Knossos, a structure so vast and complex it could have given birth to the tale. Walking through its excavated remains, you do not find a simple, orderly layout. Instead, you encounter a bewildering honeycomb of hundreds of interconnecting rooms, twisting corridors that lead to dead ends, and multiple levels stacked upon one another. For any outsider or invading force, this architectural maze would have been profoundly disorienting. The sheer confusion of navigating this place, with its sudden staircases and identical-looking storage magazines, could easily have been exaggerated over generations into the story of an impossible, man-made maze. But the physical inspiration might extend even deeper than the palace floor. The hills surrounding Knossos are riddled with extensive natural cave systems, places like the Cave of Skotino, which were used for sacred rituals and offerings. If you were a Greek storyteller arriving at this site centuries after the Minoan collapse, what would you see? A colossal, ruined palace that felt like a maze on the surface, and dark, twisting caverns leading into the earth beneath it. The legend writes itself, a fusion of monumental architecture and the primal fear of the underground. The Minoans were a wealthy, seafaring power, their economy built on trade across the Mediterranean. Such a society would have needed to protect its riches. It is not a great leap to suggest that they might have utilized or even expanded these natural subterranean spaces, creating hidden vaults for storing valuable trade goods like copper, pottery, and olive oil, safe from pirates or rival powers. Some of those confusing palace corridors might have even served as emergency escape routes for the elite, allowing them to vanish from the upper world and reappear in the hidden landscape beyond the palace walls. The enduring power of the Minotaur myth speaks to something fundamental in us all, a fascination with the dangerous, confusing space that lies just beyond the familiar. It asks a compelling question. Was the labyrinth a purely mythological warning, or was it a distorted memory of a very real, sophisticated, and intentionally bewildering Bronze Age complex, both above and below the ground? This blurring of history and legend shows us that the foundations of early cities are not just made of stone, but of stories, and sometimes the stories hold a glimmer of the truth. The line between the earthly and the divine was famously thin at Delphi. Pilgrims from across the known world climbed the sacred slopes not just to see a grand temple, but to stand at the very navel of the world, a place where they believed the god Apollo spoke directly to humanity. His voice was channeled through the Pythia, a single priestess who would descend into a small, enclosed chamber, sit on a tripod over a fissure in the rock, and breathe in strange vapors rising from the deep. In this altered state, she would utter the cryptic prophecies that would launch fleets, halt wars, and shape the course of Greek history. For centuries, this was dismissed as myth or priestly trickery. How could a crack in the ground produce divine intoxication? The answer was literally underfoot all along. Modern geological investigations revealed a stunning truth. The Temple of Apollo was built precisely at the intersection of two major fault lines, a geological crossroads that fractured the bedrock deep beneath the sanctuary. These same faults could have acted as conduits, allowing traces of petrochemical gases like sweet-smelling ethylene to seep upward from far below. Ethylene is known to produce disorientation, trance states, and a feeling of euphoria, effects that perfectly match the ancient descriptions of the Pythia's divine frenzy. This presents a profound mystery of cause and effect. Did the clever priests of Apollo discover this natural geological phenomenon and then build an entire, immensely powerful religious institution around it, staging the ultimate divine revelation? Or was the site already considered sacred for millennia, a place of strange and potent energies that the later temple was simply designed to harness and formalize? The priests were not merely custodians of a building. They were the gatekeepers of a power source, interpreting the chaotic, drug-induced utterings of the Pythia into the coherent, often ambiguous prophecies that guided nations. This is a different kind of tunnel vision mystery altogether. It requires no carved stone passages or hidden chambers. The foundation of Delphi's global influence was a natural fissure, a flaw in the Earth's crust that was interpreted as a direct line to the gods. The real oracle was not just the woman, but the very geology of the place. it forces us to wonder how many other sacred sites, places of miracle and vision, were also built upon a tangible, physical anomaly that ancient science could not explain, only worship. The ground itself was the engine of belief. The story beneath Edinburgh's South Bridge is not one of sacred ritual or imperial engineering, but of a city turning its back on its own shadow. Built in the late 1700s, the vaults were a practical solution, a series of sturdy stone arches constructed to support the bridge and the grand buildings rising upon it. The spaces within these arches were never meant to be forgotten. They were rented out as storage cellars, workshops for cobblers and taverns, a bustling, if dimly lit, extension of the city's commerce. But the design was fatally flawed. Built directly into the earth and lacking proper damp proofing, the walls began to weep moisture almost immediately. The respectable businesses soon moved out, driven away by the relentless seep of water and the pervasive chill, and into this void moved the people who had nowhere else to go. The vaults were swiftly claimed by the destitute, the criminals, and the utterly desperate. What had been a space for industry became a subterranean slum, a warren of squalor hidden directly beneath the feet of Edinburgh's elegant new town. In these dripping chambers, entire families huddled around makeshift fires, their world defined by the constant sound of dripping water and the footsteps of the wealthy echoing on the cobblestones overhead. This was a different kind of underworld, a social underworld where poverty was the true minotaur, and the labyrinth offered no escape, only a desperate, tragic refuge. The city authorities, unable to control the crime and disease festering in the vaults, made a drastic decision. They simply sealed the entrances with brick and mortar, entombing an entire community's worth of possessions and memories. For over a century, this hidden chapter was left to the silence, a ghost of the Industrial Revolution preserved in perfect, damp darkness. Their rediscovery in the 1980s cracked open a time capsule of heartbreaking intimacy. Archaeologists found toys, broken clay pipes and buttons, the small, personal artifacts of lives lived on the very edge of survival. The mystery of the Edinburgh vaults is not about a lost technology or a forgotten faith. It is a deeply human mystery. What stories of resilience and despair are held in these stones? Each scrap of fabric, each worn-out shoe, whispers of a person who was forced to live in the dark so that the city above could shine more brightly. These vaults force us to remember that for every grand narrative of progress celebrated in the sunlit squares, there is often a parallel, painful history buried just beneath the surface, a foundation not of stone but of human struggle. While Edinburgh's vaults were sealed to hide social decay, the foundations of a far older city were designed for the exact opposite purpose. In the Indus Valley, the great city of Mohenjo-Daro was a marvel of foresight, built upon a hidden latticework of cleanliness. Its most remarkable feature was not a temple or a palace, but something far more revolutionary, the world's first sophisticated urban drainage system. A network of meticulously laid, brick-lined tunnels ran beneath every major street, channeling wastewater and monsoon rains away from homes and directly into the Indus River. This was not a haphazard addition. It was a standardized city-wide infrastructure integrated into the very blueprint of the metropolis. Every house, from the largest to the most modest, had its own bathroom and drainage chute that fed into this subterranean network. The system was designed with inspection traps and manholes, allowing for regular maintenance and clearing of blockages. This reveals a society with a staggering degree of centralized planning and a collective commitment to public health that would not be seen again for thousands of years. The true mystery of Mohenjo-Daro is not what these tunnels did, but why they were built. What unique set of values compelled this ancient civilization to invest so much labor and ingenuity into something as unglamorous as sanitation? It speaks to a world view where communal well-being was paramount, where the health of the city itself was considered sacred. This hidden web of brick and water was the bedrock of their success. It allowed for a density of population that would have been impossible without it, preventing the outbreaks of disease that plagued other contemporary urban centers. The tunnels of Mohenjo-Daro challenge our romantic notions of ancient mysteries. The greatest enigma here is not a lost treasure or a cryptic ritual, but a society's profound and practical wisdom. Their vision looked centuries ahead, understanding that the most critical foundation for a thriving city was not a wall to keep enemies out, but a clean channel to carry waste away. High in the thin air of the Peruvian Andes, the priests of Chavin de Huantar engineered divinity itself. Their temple complex, built over 7 centuries before the Common Era, was a masterwork of psychological architecture, a machine for making gods. At its heart lay an intricate web of underground galleries, narrow passageways, and precisely angled ventilation shafts. This was not a refuge from enemies or a channel for water. It was a carefully staged theater, and the entire religious experience was its script. The goal was to overwhelm the senses and dismantle a worshipper's grip on reality. Imagine being led through a pitch-black, labyrinthine tunnel, your mind already altered by the potent brew of the San Pedro cactus. The air is thick and cool, the way forward uncertain. Then a sound begins, a deep, guttural roar that seems to come from the very stones around you, vibrating through your chest. Unbeknownst to you, a priest is speaking into a network of resonating ducts, his voice transformed into the terrifying growl of a jaguar, a powerful spiritual emblem. At the same moment, a hidden shaft directs a gust of air across a burning censer, causing plumes of incense smoke to pour mysteriously from the carved mouth of a stone idol in the chamber ahead. In your disoriented state, the effect is not a trick, it is a miracle. The statue is alive, breathing its sacred essence and speaking to you with the voice of a primal predator. The line between the earthly and the supernatural has been utterly erased. The true genius of Chavin lies in this deliberate manipulation. The priestly class were not just spiritual guides. They were the directors and technicians of this subterranean spectacle, leveraging acoustic science and airflow dynamics long before such concepts were formally defined. They understood that belief could be architected, that awe could be manufactured deep within the earth. The mystery here is not about a lost technology, but about the timeless mechanics of power. How did this priestly elite use sensory overload and controlled revelation to cement their authority? The answer is written in the cold, dark galleries. By orchestrating these divine encounters, they positioned themselves as the sole intermediaries between the people and the terrifying forces of the spirit world. Their authority was literally set in stone, buried beneath the temple foundations. This was social control through neurological manipulation, a form of psychological theater so sophisticated it still commands our respect and our unease thousands of years later. Beneath the echoing choirs and soaring arches of Europe's great churches, a silent city of the dead awaited the living. These hidden crypts carved deep under the stone floors were far more than simple graves. They were spiritual fortresses and pilgrimage destinations, housing the bones of saints and martyrs whose presence was believed to sanctify the very ground above. A pilgrim would come not just to pray in the church, but to descend into its crypt, to stand as close as possible to these holy relics, seeking a physical connection to the divine. This made the underground chamber the most powerful heart of the entire building. Yet for all their sanctity, these spaces hold enduring mysteries sealed behind stone. Architectural surveys of many medieval cathedrals reveal anomalies, blocked up archways leading into darkness, or voids behind walls that appear on no historical plan. Legends persist of hidden chambers constructed in times of plague or persecution, used to conceal not just treasure, but heretical texts or the remains of controversial kings, their true resting places erased from official history. One of the most tantalizing puzzles lies in the Cathedral of Lund, Sweden. Beneath its majestic nave, a massive, intricately carved crypt from the 1200s remains almost perfectly preserved. At its center stands a statue of a giant, embraced by a man, a figure shrouded in myth. For centuries, a local legend claimed that the giant would awaken if the cathedral ever fell. But the deeper mystery is what might be sealed in the older, unexcavated layers beneath it. The crypt we can see was built upon the foundations of a much older wooden church, and who knows what relics or secrets from that first settlement still lie buried, untouched for 1,000 years. These crypts force us to see European history not as a single story, but as a vertical narrative. Each city is built upon layers of faith and power, with the deepest layers often holding the most profound and most carefully guarded truths. The strength of an empire was not always measured in the height of its walls, but in the depth of its larders. While priests channeled divine voices and engineers guided rivers through the dark, another, more pragmatic form of power was being secured far beneath the city streets. To feed immense urban populations and field vast armies, empires from Rome to Persia to China engineered vast subterranean granaries, colossal silos carved into the earth to preserve grain for years, even decades. This was not merely about storing food, it was about storing stability itself. A single season of drought or a prolonged siege could topple a dynasty, but a full granary was a fortress against fate. These chambers were engineering marvels, meticulously lined with plaster to create a sealed environment that kept out destructive moisture and voracious pests. The grain, dried and poured into these cool, dark tombs, entered a state of suspended animation, its life-giving potential preserved until the moment of greatest need. The very existence of these facilities was often a closely guarded state secret. In a world where control of the food supply was synonymous with control of the people, knowledge was as valuable as the grain itself. An enemy who knew the location and capacity of your reserves could calculate exactly how long you could endure a blockade. So these hidden storehouses were dispersed, camouflaged, and protected by loyal garrisons. The true mystery, however, lies not in their construction, but in their administration. How did an ancient bureaucracy, without computers or digital inventories, manage the staggering logistics of this buried bounty? Imagine the record keepers, their lamps flickering in the stale air, moving through caverns filled with thousands of tons of wheat and barley. They had to track every bushel deposited, every measure distributed, accounting for spoilage and theft across a network of silos that might span an entire province. They used clay tablets and papyrus scrolls to maintain a perfect balance between what was stored, what was needed for the capital, and what could be allocated to legions on the march. This invisible web of accounting was the true nervous system of the empire. A single miscalculation could lead to rot in one silo and starvation in a distant city, triggering unrest that could ripple to the very throne. The silent, dark granaries were, in fact, a constant, humming center of imperial activity. Their security allowed cities to grow beyond what the immediate land could support and enabled generals to plan campaigns that stretched for years, confident that their troops would not have to forage in hostile territory. The next time you picture a Roman emperor, do not just see the golden laurel crown. See the thousands of tons of grain sleeping in the dark beneath his feet, the true foundation of his power and the hidden reason for his army's footsteps. Power is not always built in broad daylight. The Knights Templar understood this better than most. As their wealth and influence grew, so too did the legends of what they hid beneath their feet. Across Europe and the Holy Land, whispers persist of a secret world carved under their commanderies, a network of tunnels used to move treasure, conduct clandestine rituals, or spirit away brothers during sudden arrests. These stories paint a picture of a shadowy, all-powerful order, but the truth is far more fascinating. At their historic headquarters on Jerusalem's Temple Mount, the Templars did not need to invent a hidden world. They inherited one. They occupied and expanded upon a vast subterranean landscape that already existed, including monumental cisterns and the legendary stables of Solomon, capable of housing hundreds of horses. This was not a secret network for escape, but a highly practical, essential infrastructure for a major military and religious complex. The gap between the romantic legend and the mundane reality is where the true mystery lies. After the order was violently dissolved in the early 14th century on charges of heresy and corruption, their properties were seized and their reputation systematically destroyed. It was in this atmosphere of fear and accusation that the wildest stories began to flourish. Enemies of the Templars had every reason to portray them as sinister conspirators meeting in dark tunnels, and the absence of clear records only fed the speculation. So, what tangible evidence actually exists for these legendary passages? In a few locations, like the Templar commandery in Dom, France, there are indeed underground chambers and tunnels that connect to the cliffs overlooking the Dordogne River. Yet these spaces were likely used for storage or as emergency sally ports, not for hiding mythical treasure. The enduring power of the Templar tunnel myth speaks less to historical fact and more to our own fascination with the idea of a hidden world, a parallel reality run by initiates guarding profound secrets. This narrative, once a tool for propaganda, has now become permanently enshrined in the foundation of Western esoteric thought. We are left to wonder whether the real treasure was ever gold, or if it was simply the potent, intoxicating idea of the secret itself, buried so deep that it can never be fully unearthed. Constantinople's legendary defenses were not just its massive walls, but a secret ocean buried directly beneath them. The Byzantines mastered a subterranean science of survival, creating vast, cathedral-like cisterns that held millions of gallons of fresh water. The most famous of these, the Basilica cistern, was not a dank cellar but an underground palace, with a forest of 336 marble columns rising from chest-deep water, reflecting in the still surface. This was a strategic reservoir designed to sustain the city's enormous population through years of blockade, making it impervious to an enemy's simplest and most devastating tactic, cutting off the water supply. But how did such a system function on a daily basis? An entire, hidden workforce of custodians must have tended these dark waters, monitoring levels, cleaning silt, and preventing contamination, their footsteps echoing in the perpetual gloom. The mystery deepens when we consider the sheer logistics. Aqueducts brought the water in, but how was it distributed upward to the city? A network of pipes and pumps, likely operated by human or animal power, would have been required, a forgotten technology humming quietly beneath the bustling markets and forums. Beyond these watery cathedrals lay another secret, a web of secure tunnels connecting imperial palaces, churches, and military barracks. These passages allowed for the swift, unseen movement of the emperor's guard or a desperate messenger carrying news from a besieged gate. In moments of extreme peril, the emperor himself might have used these routes to vanish from one palace and reappear in a secure fortress, a ghost moving through the city's foundations. The true genius of Byzantine engineering was this fusion of the grand and the practical. The same civilization that produced breathtaking golden mosaics also invested immense wealth in building this invisible shield. The survival of Constantinople for 1,000 years against countless sieges stands as a testament to a simple, profound truth. A city's splendor above ground was only as enduring as the strength and foresight buried in the dark beneath it. The silent gaze of the great Sphinx holds more than ancient wisdom. It guards a secret world beneath its paws. For centuries, explorers and archaeologists have reported strange openings in the rock around the monument, shafts that descend into an impenetrable darkness. While some of these passages are clearly natural geological features or later intrusive tombs from the Roman era, others defy easy explanation. This has fueled one of archaeology's most persistent legends, the existence of a Hall of Records. This mythical library is said to contain the entire knowledge of a lost civilization, perhaps even Atlantis, sealed away for a future age. The idea is intoxicating, a hidden archive that could answer every unanswered question about humanity's remote past. But is there any physical evidence to support such a fantastic claim? Modern science has begun to peer through the stone without breaking it. Ground-penetrating radar and other seismic listening devices have mapped the subsurface around the Sphinx, and the data reveals tantalizing anomalies. There are voids down there, spaces where solid rock should be. The debate now is not about whether these cavities exist, but what they are. Are they simply more caves carved by water millions of years ago, or are they chambers deliberately constructed and then forgotten? The Egyptian authorities have, at times, allowed limited investigations, but the full truth remains buried, both by sand and by cautious bureaucracy. The mystery of the Sphinx's tunnels is the ultimate tunnel vision. It represents our deepest hope that the past is not a closed book, that a single discovery in the dark could illuminate everything. What would it mean to find such a hall? It would not just be a collection of artifacts. It would be a key, unlocking a door to a history we have only ever guessed at, a revelation waiting in the silence under the world's most famous guardian. The stone itself became both sanctuary and temple for the ancestral Pueblones. High on the sun-baked cliffs of Mesa Verde, they constructed not just dwellings, but an entire civilization tucked into the embrace of the rock. Their most profound spaces were the kivas, circular chambers dug deep into the earth, their roofs flush with the ground. To enter one was to perform a ritual of descent, climbing down a lone ladder through a single hole in the ceiling, leaving the bright world behind. This was a deliberate, symbolic journey into the underworld, a sacred realm where the community would gather to connect with the spirits of their ancestors and the powerful forces they believed resided within the earth. The air in these chambers was cool and still, smelling of packed earth and juniper smoke, a stark contrast to the desert heat outside. Here, in the flickering firelight, stories were passed down, ceremonies were performed, and the social fabric of the people was woven and reinforced. But the kivas were just one part of a much larger architectural vision. By building their homes into vast natural alcoves high on canyon walls, the ancestral Pueblones created a vertical city that was, in effect, subterranean in its nature. These cliff dwellings were naturally insulated from the scorching summer sun and the bitter winter cold. Their lofty, concealed locations made them incredibly difficult for enemies to approach, offering a formidable defensive advantage. The entire settlement was a masterclass in adaptive living, a seamless integration of human habitation with the natural landscape. This makes their sudden and complete abandonment around the year 1300 all the more haunting. Why would a people leave such a perfectly adapted, heavily fortified homeland? The answer likely lies in a complex web of pressures. A devastating, prolonged drought may have crippled their ability to grow corn, the cornerstone of their survival. Perhaps internal social strife fractured their community from within, or maybe their spiritual beliefs so tied to the land, dictated a migration when the balance of the world above no longer aligned with the sacred world below. Their departure was not a disappearance but a movement, a relocation to new lands where their descendants, the modern Pueblo people, continue to thrive. The silent stone rooms of Mesa Verde stand as a powerful monument to a cultural truth. For the ancestral Pueblones, tunneling into the earth was far more than a practical solution for shelter. It was a way of embedding their society, their rituals, and their very identity into the enduring rock of the canyon. The sheer weight of Jerusalem's history presses down through the stone, compressing millennia into a dense, vertical narrative. While the Byzantines stored water and the Persians guided rivers, the bedrock beneath this holy city became a labyrinth of faith and desperation. This is not a single, planned network, but a chaotic tapestry of tunnels, aqueducts, and ritual baths known as mikvot, each layer representing a different chapter of belief and survival. The most famous of these is Hezekiah's Tunnel, a breathtaking work of 8th century before the Common Era engineering. To stand in its chest-deep, cool water is to participate in an ancient miracle. Two teams of diggers working with nothing but hammers and chisels started from opposite ends of the ridge, carving a winding, 1,750-foot-long channel to bring the vital waters of the Gihon spring safely inside the city walls. They followed a natural fissure in the rock, their sounds guiding them toward each other until the final breakthrough. The chisel marks are still visible, telling a story of incredible precision and immense pressure, a public works project born from the fear of an Assyrian siege. Yet for every documented tunnel like Hezekiah's, there are a dozen shadows. Whispers persist of secret passages used by kings and high priests to move unseen between the royal palace and the Temple Mount, avoiding the crowded, politically charged streets above. Could these be more than just legend? During the great Jewish revolts against Rome, these subterranean spaces became a theater of guerrilla war. Jewish rebels used cisterns and hidden tunnels to launch surprise attacks on Roman legions, to communicate between besieged neighborhoods, and to store supplies away from the eyes of the enemy. The historian Josephus writes of the Romans discovering these subterranean hideouts, a terrifying game of cat and mouse played out in the dark. Modern archaeology continues to add pieces to this puzzle. Every time a new foundation is dug or a sewer line is repaired, there is a chance of breaking through into a forgotten void. Recent excavations have uncovered previously unknown stairways leading deep into the bedrock, sealed chambers, and extended portions of ancient aqueducts. Each finding forces a revision of the city's map, proving that the world below is still far from fully known. What lost passage from the time of the First Temple, from the age of Solomon himself, might still lie concealed behind a wall of rubble, its entrance waiting for a single shift in the dust? The tunnels of Jerusalem are more than just archaeology. They are the city's subconscious, a physical manifestation of a past built on faith, fractured by conflict, and perpetually seeking a way to endure. Every stone in the darkness tells a story of a prayer whispered in a ritual bath, a soldier's desperate breath in a siege tunnel, or the quiet footfall of a priest carrying a sacred object through the earth. The Paris catacombs present a city meticulously built from the dead. Beneath the elegant boulevards and bustling cafes lies a silent, parallel metropolis, its streets lined not with cobblestones but with the neatly stacked bones of over 6 million souls. This immense ossuary was a radical solution to a crisis festering in the sunlit world above. By the late 18th century, Parisian cemeteries were so overflowing that they posed a dire threat to public health, with decomposing matter seeping into the water supply. The answer was a monumental act of urban recycling. The city's abandoned limestone quarries, which had provided the very stone to build the city, were consecrated as a new, final resting place. But how do you move a population of the dead? For years, every night under the cover of darkness, solemn processions of black-draped wagons would carry countless skeletons from their former graves. Priests led the way, chanting prayers for the dead, as workers below ground received this endless river of bones, sorting and arranging them with a strange, bureaucratic order. Tibias and femurs form the backing walls, while rows of skulls create a grim facade, a stark reminder of the immense scale of this operation. It was an act of both sanitation and reverence, a way to honor the dead by giving them a stable, eternal home, even if that home was a dark maze far beneath the living. Yet this official city of the dead has a secret, beating heart. Beyond the small section open to tourists, the catacombs stretch for nearly 200 miles, a forbidden labyrinth known only to a subculture of modern explorers called the cataphiles. These individuals slip past sealed gates and police patrols to enter a world of absolute darkness and profound silence. Down here, they have created something astonishing. In hidden chambers, they have built fully stocked bars, a clandestine cinema with plush seats, and intricate murals painted directly on the stone walls. They hold dinner parties in rooms they have named, and navigate the treacherous tunnels using maps passed among initiates. What drives a person to risk arrest, getting lost, or tunnel collapse to spend time in this realm of bones? For some, it is the ultimate escape from the surveillance and noise of the modern city, a place of pure freedom and anonymity. For others, it is the raw, physical connection to history, to a Paris untouched by centuries of change above. The catacombs are a living mystery, a space where the macabre order of the past coexists with the rebellious, creative energy of the present. It is a dialogue between the city's darkest history and its most vibrant underground spirit, all playing out in the endless dark. This pursuit of a perfect acoustic and visual environment finds one of its most ancient and polished expressions in the Barabar Hills of India. Carved from a single, unyielding piece of granite in the 3rd century before the Common Era, these caves are a testament to an obsession with perfection. They were gifted by the mighty Mauryan Emperor Ashoka to communities of wandering ascetics, monks who had renounced all worldly possessions. Yet the caves themselves are anything but crude shelters. Step inside, and you are met with a surface so flawlessly polished it reflects your own form back at you, a mirror made of living rock. The walls and ceilings curve with a geometric precision that seems impossible for the era, achieved with nothing more than hammers, chisels, and an unimaginable amount of patient labor. But the true marvel reveals itself when you speak. The chambers possess a remarkable acoustic quality, a resonant echo that lingers and amplifies sound, transforming a simple chant into a chorus that seems to emanate from the stone itself. So why create such a technically perfect space for monks who sought to transcend the material world? Were these simply quiet rooms for meditation, or did their engineered properties serve a deeper ritual purpose? The sonic resonance would have made any mantra or recited teaching vibrate through the body of the listener, deepening its impact and aiding in the memorization of sacred texts. The flawless, reflective surfaces presented the monks with a world devoid of distraction, a blank slate upon which to project their inner vision. In this void of sensory input, the only thing to see was oneself, and the only thing to hear was the amplified sound of one's own spiritual pursuit. This was tunneling not for survival, but for transcendence. The craftsmen were not merely digging out a space. They were sculpting an instrument for enlightenment, using the hardest stone to create the most refined conditions for the most delicate of human transformations, the quieting of the mind. The true foundations of Angkor Wat were not its towering stone spires, but the silent, liquid arteries that pulsed beneath the soil. This magnificent temple complex, the heart of the mighty Khmer Empire, was sustained by a hidden hydraulic system of breathtaking ambition. Vast man-made reservoirs called barrays stretched for miles, holding billions of gallons of monsoon rainwater. An intricate latticework of canals and underground channels then distributed this life-giving resource across the landscape, performing a delicate and vital balancing act. It prevented catastrophic floods during the relentless rainy season and released stored water to nourish endless rice paddies through the punishing dry season. This engineered heartbeat enabled the empire to feed a population approaching 1 million people, creating a metropolis in the middle of a jungle. Recent LiDAR technology, which uses lasers to see through the dense forest canopy, has revealed the staggering truth. The urban sprawl around the stone temples was far more extensive than anyone had dreamed, a sprawling city of homes and roads all perfectly integrated into this hidden water grid. The entire civilization was literally plumbed into the land. This makes the empire's eventual collapse one of history's most profound puzzles. How could a society with such masterful control over its environment simply vanish? The answer may lie in the fragility of the very system that gave it life. A prolonged period of unstable monsoons, swinging between severe drought and devastating floods, could have overwhelmed the engineers' careful calculations. Silt washing into the canals from deforested hillsides might have slowly choked the channels, turning a precise network into a stagnant, malarial swamp. The hidden foundations of Anchor were not stone but water, and the empire's fate may have been sealed not by an invading army, but by the slow, silent failure of the flow that once made everything possible. The ingenuity of the Kukai tunnels transformed the very earth into a weapon. During the Vietnam War, this sprawling labyrinth beneath the feet of American soldiers became a legendary stronghold for Viet Cong guerrillas. Imagine a network so extensive it connected entire villages, a subterranean city complete with field hospitals performing surgery by candlelight, kitchens designed to disperse their smoke through hidden vents, and command centers planning attacks just meters below enemy bases. The tunnels were a masterclass in tactical design. Entrances were camouflaged by leaves or hidden under latrine pits, while ventilation shafts were artfully disguised as termite mounds. Every footstep above could mean triggering a deadly bamboo spike trap or a concealed punji stake pit. The sheer will to survive here defies comprehension. Thousands of people endured years in these cramped, dark passages where the air was thin and the constant threat of discovery or collapse was a daily reality. How does the human spirit not only endure but adapt to such an existence? They built trapdoors, sleeping chambers, and storage rooms, creating a hidden society that sustained a resistance movement against a vastly superior military force. This modern network proves a timeless truth. The strategic value of the underground has not diminished with time, it has only evolved. From ancient refuges to 20th century guerrilla warfare, the space beneath our feet remains a decisive factor in the story of human conflict, a stark reminder that sometimes the most powerful fortress is the one you cannot see. For the Maya, the line between our world and the next was not a solid barrier but a porous membrane. Deep in the Yucatan jungle, this threshold was marked by gaping holes in the earth, the cenotes. These were not merely sources of water in a dry land. They were the sacred mouths of Xibalba, the terrifying and revered underworld. To approach the edge of a cenote was to stand at the brink of another reality, a place of gods and ancestors of both creation and decay. The most profound rituals of their civilization were designed to bridge this divide. Priests and offerings were lowered into the profound darkness, down to the water's surface shimmering far below. The most famous of these portals, the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, has yielded a stunning catalogue of devotion. Archaeologists dredging its depths have brought up golden figurines, intricately carved jade, and copal incense, all gifts intended to appease the powerful and temperamental rain god Chak. But the waters also held a more somber treasure, the remains of human sacrifices, individuals chosen to carry the community's most desperate pleas into the realm of the gods. What cosmic drama was being performed in these natural theaters? The Maya believed that for the world above to thrive, the world below had to be honored. The sun each night had to pass through Xibalba to be reborn at dawn. The rains that fed their crops were released from the underworld's watery chambers. By casting their most precious objects and even their own people into the abyss, they were participating in this eternal cycle. They were feeding the cosmos, ensuring the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and the world would not descend into chaos. The true foundation of their cities, then, was not the stone of their pyramids, but this spiritual understanding. Their entire world was balanced precariously over a sacred abyss, and their survival depended on maintaining a delicate and often terrifying conversation with the darkness below. Even the world's most visible barrier might have relied on an invisible counterpart. The Great Wall of China, that iconic stone serpent draped over the mountains, presents a paradox of immense visibility hiding potential secrets in the dark below. Legends whisper of a secondary network, a web of hidden tunnels snaking beneath its formidable length. These passages were not for sewage or storage, but for the silent, unseen movement of an entire defense force. Imagine a garrison commander receiving a signal of an attack miles away. Instead of marching his soldiers along the wall's crest in plain sight, he could lead them down a hidden stairwell into a subterranean corridor. They would move swiftly and silently through the earth, emerging from a concealed exit directly behind the enemy, or reinforcing a crumbling section of the battlements without an arrow ever being fired at them. The strategic advantage is undeniable, turning a static wall into a dynamic, living defense system. While much of this remains in the realm of compelling folklore, the logic is rooted in sound military doctrine. We know for a fact that certain sections of the wall contain more than just the broad walking paths we see today. There are fortified gates like the Gyeongguan Pass, with their intricate inner chambers and heavily defended courtyards, which could easily conceal entrances to deeper works. Some stretches have small, tunnel-like structures built into their foundations, spaces too narrow and confined for anything but single-file movement in the dark. The enduring mystery is separating the engineered reality from the tactical rumor. How much of this subterranean network was ever actually built? It is entirely possible that stories of these tunnels were deliberately spread by Chinese generals as a form of psychological warfare. An enemy army camping at the base of the wall would never feel secure, constantly fearing that soldiers could materialize from the ground itself at any moment. This paranoia would be a powerful, cost-effective weapon. The true strength of the Great Wall, therefore, may have been a brilliant duality. Its awesome, visible presence was meant to daunt and deter, while the mere suggestion of its hidden, mobile heart was designed to breed fear and uncertainty. It stands as a monument not just to physical engineering, but to the profound cunning of its defenders, who understood that the most potent threats are often the ones you cannot see. While empires stockpiled grain and water, another essential commodity was being preserved in the dark, a substance as fleeting as it was precious. Long before the hum of a refrigerator became the sound of preservation, ancient engineers were mastering the art of cold. From the deserts of Persia to the villas of Rome, they constructed subterranean ice houses, ingenious chambers designed to defy the seasons themselves. In Persia, these structures were known as yakchuls, meaning ice pits. They were not simple holes in the ground, but sophisticated domed buildings, often rising high above the desert floor. Their secret was a double-shelled design. The exterior dome was built from a special water-resistant mortar, while the interior was a deep, shaded pit, sometimes lined with straw for extra insulation. During the cold winter months, workers would channel water from nearby Qanats into shallow pools where it would freeze overnight. They would then harvest the ice, break it into blocks, and haul it down into the Yakchal's depths, stacking it high. The structure itself did the rest. The tall, conical dome allowed hot air to rise and escape through a top vent, while the thick, insulating walls and the Earth's own cool temperature kept the interior in a perpetual winter. A single Yakchal could preserve ice for months, even through the blistering summer heat. This was not merely a luxury for the wealthy, it was a public utility. Ice was used to preserve food, to cool drinks, and even to create early forms of frozen desserts, a touch of winter's magic in the heart of summer. The same technology appeared independently across the globe. In Europe, wealthy Romans built ice pits or glaciaria on their country estates, lining deep pits with straw and timber to store snow hauled down from the mountains. How did this precise understanding of geothermal principles and passive cooling emerge in cultures so distant from one another? Was this knowledge carried along ancient trade routes by merchants and travelers, a silent exchange of engineering wisdom, or does it point to a more fundamental human ingenuity, a universal response to a common need? When a society faces the same elemental challenge, the solution often emerges from the same logical place, the stable, cool embrace of the earth. These hidden ice houses remind us that the greatest mysteries beneath our feet are not always about gods or gold. Sometimes they are about the simple, profound human desire for a cool drink on a hot day, and the brilliant, quiet engineering that made it possible for centuries. Our journey ends with a simple but profound realization. The true pulse of ancient life did not just beat in the sunlit plazas and towering temples, but in the cool, dark silence underneath them. We have walked through defensive labyrinths like Derinkuyu, where entire cities vanished into the earth for safety. We have felt the resonant hum of the Hypogeum, where sound itself was sculpted into a tool for transcendence. We have seen sacred cenotes where the Maya spoke with gods, and icy vaults where Persians preserved winter's chill against the desert sun. These spaces were not simply holes in the ground. They were foundational. They were the hidden engines of faith, the secret shields against famine and war, the physical expression of a culture's deepest beliefs about life, death, and the cosmos. They challenge our modern gaze, which so often looks upward at monuments, to instead look down, to consider the immense labor, the breathtaking ingenuity, and the profound spiritual yearning that drove people to carve their legacy into the living rock. The next time you stroll through the historic center of any old city, pause for a moment, feel the ground beneath your feet. Remember that its true story is a vertical one, written in layers of ingenuity and desperation, of prayer and preservation, all buried just out of sight. We have only just begun to listen to the whispers from the dark. What other secrets do you believe are waiting patiently for the right moment to be uncovered? Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you have enjoyed this descent into history, subscribe for more journeys into the unknown.